Winter. Time for ice fishing, snowmobiles, and maybe a little pond hockey. Winter's full of fun and games. Until a pipe freezes and bursts. Get ahead of the freezing weather with Mow and Flow. It monitors your home's water and shuts it off automatically before it can burst your winter plans. Moen.
This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday, or welcome to, I don't know why I say happy Tuesday. Maybe I should say welcome to this Tuesday edition of Death by Southwest. Today we are finishing. This is part 4 and the final part of the Austin Yogurt Shop murders. Although, like I said on yesterday's bonus, this case could easily go on for several more episodes. And I'm still toying with the idea of kind of redoing this, but reaching out to the family and detectives and trying to get some interviews and putting this together as more of a scripted case. But we'll see. I don't know about that. Because then I feel like, well, is that just overdone? Because we've taken 4 episodes to do this. I also realize I probably don't have to work this all out on this podcast right now. So I will stop talking about it and figure it out on my own. I don't have to figure everything out on this microphone with all of you listening. Although it does seem like I do that a lot. Work through stuff on here. It's helpful. How is everyone's Tuesday today? I hope it's wonderful. I haven't gotten that many responses. Now, was it just yesterday I was like begging for you to tell me your favorite Halloween movies? I feel like it was last week, actually. So I haven't gotten many, but I did get a few. I got a few voicemails and texts. And I'm going to talk about them. We're going to do a little brief intro. And Patreon, if you're listening, I'm not doing this on video. I know that you'll all be very upset to not be able to see my unmade up face and coconut oiled hair. But I find that sometimes it does distract me a little bit. I get too self-conscious and I want to wrap up this story nice and strong. So full concentration on my notes and not on the video. So for everyone who did reach out via voicemail, text, on Patreon, and emails, thank you. And also thank you to everyone on Instagram whose messages I have not checked yet. But the goal is, because it is not super, super late today, it's only 4:00 rather than like last night I was recording at 7. The goal is to finish this and then work my way through Instagram. So we'll see. Okay. So got a lovely message from, I think it's Johanna. I think it's missing an A. Like she typed her name without an A. But I think it's Johanna. And she's a longtime listener. I'm not going to say where she's from just to protect her identity. It's kind of silly that I do that, don't you think? It's probably really unnecessary. But I don't know. Maybe Johanna has some friends who also listen in her town, and she doesn't want them to know that she wrote in. But she said that she really enjoys the mini crimes that I've been started doing. Thank you. Obviously love good feedback like that. She said she does miss hearing Jenna with me, and she's hoping that we can kind of work everything out. And so do I. And happy birthday. Her birthday is coming up. So I wanted to say happy birthday. And she did give me, I think outside of people who have maybe messaged on Instagram, she's the only person who has sent me a Halloween movie. She said her favorite Halloween movies are Practical Magic, which is maybe her favorite of all time. Such a good one. I haven't seen that in so long, so I'm adding it to the list. I Know What You Did Last Summer. Another great one. And I actually did recently watch I Know What You Did Last Summer and whatever the second one is. And then I also watched the TV show. There's maybe HBO. No, I think it's on Amazon Prime. But there's a new, within the past few years, TV show that they made based on it. It was pretty good. It was like a little, woke, like how everything is nowadays, which I'm not saying is a good thing or a bad thing. But it was like, okay, I don't know. We're not going to go down that road right now. And her third is Halloween, the original. And these are ones she said that she can watch again and again, which are my favorite kind of movies in general, but also definitely Halloween movies, ones that I can watch over and over again. So I'm going to have to watch Practical Magic and Halloween, the original. I think I've only seen once, actually. So adding that to the list also. Thank you, Johanna. And yeah, please, anyone else, tell me your favorite Halloween movies. And I just never know. This was a really sweet message. I'm going to read part of it because I don't know how much sharing is too much without asking everyone's permission. I should say that if you guys write an email, a text message, or even a DM, or if you leave a voicemail, if you remember, can you just at the beginning or end say, you can share this? You can share my name. I would never share somebody's last name, but I don't know, saying Johanna, that's not a super common name. And then if I say where she's from, I don't know. I want to be respectful of how people feel about, look, there's not that many people listening to this. So it's not like it's going out wide to the nation. But yeah, that would be super helpful because I never know if it's okay to share what you guys send in. But this lovely lady, I guess I'm not going to say her name. She says she's listened since the very beginning. Her weekend consists of working because she's a process server. And she basically, this made me so sad. She said, I basically deliver court documents, so nobody really wants to chat with me. And she said, I'm in my car all day, and I too have become the lady that talks to people in stores, which mortifies my kids. I'm 49 and a grandmother to the most perfect 1-year-old grandson. And that is very young to be a grandmother. So hot grandmother, perhaps. And yeah, I relate. I obviously know that you relate to me because I said this, that I'm now the person who chit chats up with, checkout people and front desk people and whoever. But I think it's a nice thing. Why not be friendly? It could make somebody's day. And honestly, when I talk to people, it makes my day. Like I said, I guess that's why I brought it up last time. I get my energy and kind of feel good feelings from being around other people. It doesn't drain me. It fills me up. So I say, keep on being that person that talks to people in stores and talks to random people. Not if they don't want to talk to you. I would say don't verbally, assault is probably too strong of a word, but if somebody doesn't want to talk to you, obviously, but assuming that somebody's, in on the conversation with you, I think it's a nice thing to do. So, and then last week, I think I spoke a little bit about Josephine, who shared some scary, spooky stories of her own with me. And I did get permission from her to kind of retell those stories. So that might be part of next week's bonus. And she actually had something to say about McCamey Manor, that, haunted house, but I think torture house. Because she was from where it was from. And so she said it was a hot topic during the fall when I was in college. I graduated in 2015, so I remember people talking about applying to go to it and whatnot. I never knew anyone who went, though. I fell down the rabbit hole on it myself the beginning of the year. And she told me that I should check out the YouTube channel Reckless Ben. He did a huge expose, deep dive into it, and really exposed it for being an actual fraud. So don't be too disgusted with it until you watch his videos on it. So I'm definitely going to do that perhaps this evening. And I'm interested to see what that means, like a total fraud, like it was all fake, or the people who participated in it. And like, but I don't know, like the small bit that I watched of the Hulu thing, like these people had real bruises. Well, okay, I guess I don't know. It could have been fake, but it looked very real bruises, very real blood. So I'm definitely going to check that out. Thank you, Josephine. And then I got a message from somebody who didn't leave a name, but they said, if you want to do a scary haunted place before Halloween, look up Stull Cemetery in Stull, Kansas. Urban legend says the old church was a gateway to hell. So if the Pope was in the U.S., they would never fly over that part of Kansas. This person says they never went there before they tore it down, but knows people that had. So I'm going to also look that up. And if you sent this message, will you send another one? Well, I guess I can just respond. I don't need to know your name. I can just respond. It was a text message, I believe, because I'd love to know what the people that you know who went there have to say about it. And then again, I know it's probably super fucking annoying for everyone that I'm continually thanking Patreon people, but I do feel like people on like Natalie on Patreon, Timothy, Laura, and many others are like very involved in my day-to-day life because I post on there. I mean, not every day. And so even though I'm the one like posting things, they leave comments and share something about themselves or share their thoughts on something. And I just wanted to say thank you. Like, I really appreciate it. And I just went through right before this and saw comments that you guys have left, and haven't responded to them yet, but really appreciate, Natalie gave me some insight onto just her thoughts on family and how difficult family can be and things like that. And shared her opinion about McCamey Manor, said that she did watch the documentary and personally she wouldn't participate. And I think she says, I think people are so desensitized today and they're constantly trying to find new ways to feel something, anything at all. I don't disagree, honestly. She said that her and her kids go to Halloween horror nights every year, and that's about all that she can handle. Gore, pain, and torture isn't anything I'm interested in. And a Halloween movie recommendation. Oh, Once Bitten with Jim Carrey. I didn't finish reading that message, so I didn't see that. I've never seen that. So I am definitely going to watch that. Thank you. Timothy, you left a comment the other day that I meant to respond to and said that you were like taking care of one of your neighbor's pets and that you locked the key inside and you had to climb through the window. So just wanted to check in and make sure that you made it through the window and made it back out and everything is okay. And then Laura also gave me some thoughts about, family and how to handle this situation. I appreciate that. And she said she is terrified of any haunted house and went to Knott's Scary Farm as a teen. I always wanted to go there and hated it. And knowing what the Saw movies are about, she's disturbed by, I agree. And so she said she likes The Nightmare Before Christmas and candy corn. And she loves the sugar skulls year round, though. So she said her place always looks like it's Halloween, which I absolutely love hearing that. First of all, I love candy corn so much. It's difficult for me to not buy it when I go to the grocery store right now because it's everywhere, obviously. And I could sit and eat an entire bag. And even more than candy corn, I love the candy corn pumpkins because it's like more sugar in one bite. I'm a very, very unhealthy fat person inside my heart and soul. That is like who I am at my heart. If I lived like in the Renaissance when like being a bit bigger was more socially accepted and it was found beautiful, and I would like really lean into that. Yeah. I love sugar. And the sugar skulls. So I don't know if people know what sugar skulls are, it's Mexican sugar skulls are Day of the Dead. Like if you've ever seen any kind of like decor or artwork for Day of the Dead, it's those like decorated skulls with the flowers, and they're just beautifully decorated. I'm obsessed with them as well. And the meaning behind them is traditionally they're created as gifts for like children and family members during Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. They represent the departed souls in the circle of life. So it's to celebrate people who are no longer here, which I think is beautiful. And that makes sense because the skulls are absolutely beautiful. I am always on the lookout. It's interesting that you said that you have those decorations in your house. I don't have any, but because I love them and I would just fill my whole house. So I'm always like actively looking for either a piece of artwork or, a sculpture type thing that I'm absolutely in love with. So I can have it be in my house without buying like all of them, because that's what I actually want to do. I don't know if that didn't really make sense. But anyways, yeah, love sugar skulls. So I would probably love your house, Laura. And that's it. That's all the messages that I just got, again, not on Instagram, and wanted to just share that. Let's see. 15 minutes. People are going to be mad if I don't start the story here. I don't really have anything else to catch up on. I had therapy today, and I love having therapy. My therapist is wonderful. And sometimes, like today, I was like, I don't really know what to talk about, but I always end up finding something. Shocker, right? I mean, who'd guess that I could just sit down and talk for a full hour without having a plan? It's just what I do on here every week. But yeah, that I always feel like a little bit of a weight lifted after therapy. And so that was lovely. And I'm really excited for my friend to come down here Thursday night, because Friday we're taking her son to a pumpkin patch here. Now, I would really love my Tucson people. Will you please, please, please send me a text message at 520-302-5253 or an email, because I will definitely check those today or tomorrow again. And let me know. From what I can tell, Buckaloo Farms is no more. Like you can't get pumpkins there anymore because they moved the corn maze. And so really the only like pumpkin patch, and I said it twice, meaning like, like Jenna and I one year went here to like this place on Broadway. Broadway's a street for non-Tucson people. And, it was cute. They had like a little tent set up, but it was like off the side of the road, like off of Broadway, like up by, not by Park Place Mall, but it's a very busy street. And it was certainly not a pumpkin patch. It was a pumpkin stand, I guess. And then, so from what I can tell, there really aren't any other ones here except for Marana Pumpkin Patch, which looks like a dream place for children and a nightmare for me. It's got like fair or carnival rides and bouncy houses, and it looks like a lot. I mean, it looks fun, but to me, a pumpkin patch is what Apple Annie's looks like, but that's all the way in Wilcox, like 90 minutes away. But that's like a pumpkin field and corn maze and apple orchards and apple cider donuts and apple pie and pumpkin pie. And apparently a pumpkin patch is like a lot of delicious foods to me. And Wilcox is at a higher elevation than Tucson. It's south of Tucson, but it's at a higher elevation. And so it's like 15, 20 degrees cooler. So I don't know. I'm not sure if Jackie will be willing to drive there, but to me, that is what picking pumpkins in the fall should be like. And then I would love anyone's opinion. So Mark said we can start our October Halloween weekend fun this weekend. Not like I need his permission, but you know what I mean. And he said, like, pick what you want to do first Saturday night. So the choices are the Terror in the Corn Maze, Slaughterhouse Haunted House, or Nightfall at Old Tucson Studios. So if anyone has been, I've been to Nightfall many, many years ago with my mom and Jenna and our good friend Dave. Oh my gosh, it must have been 20 years ago. And I had like a panic attack in the haunted house. I don't even know if we were in the haunted house. I think we were in line, but it was like you had to wait in line inside in this like hallway, and they suddenly turned all the lights off and it was pitch black. And I freaked out because it triggers my claustrophobia. And I like, Mom, you got to get me out of here. And it was super. And I was the person who was like, and so my mom's like, can somebody turn on the lights? We need the lights turned on. And then you hear everyone around us like, boo. It was super embarrassing. But I didn't care at the time because I was like, I have to get out of here. I'm hoping that I can keep my shit together better than that at this point. And Nightfall, I think, is a little bit different now. I think it's like an interactive, like, whole thing. So anyone who has been to any of those, either this year or last year, what should I do first? And I will get as much video footage as possible and share it, or pictures or whatever. I've been really shitty about sharing stuff on Instagram. I'm not going to lie. There's a small part of me, this is becoming a very long introduction. There's a small part of me that doesn't love sharing pictures from the stories that I cover, which I know sucks and is stupid because I'm talking about them. I'm hosting an entire podcast about these stories. So why does it matter if I want to post pictures of the victims families, the murderers or accused people, whatever? Like, that adds context. And I don't know. It just feels like it's one thing to kind of, I don't know what the difference is. Maybe somebody can decipher what my brain is doing right now and let me know. It just feels a little exploitative. Really pisses me off that I'm not sure which one of those is correct. And that makes no sense, because if posting images on the Death by Southwest Instagram is exploitative or exploitive, then just doing this podcast is, which it is, I guess, in some ways. So I don't know. Remember yesterday when I said I'm just like a living, breathing contradiction in many ways? Here we go. Here's another one to add to that list. So I have not posted anything. I've kind of just turned Death by Southwest into my own personal Instagram, which is obnoxious. I have a personal Instagram and I don't ever use it. So where was I going with this, you ask? I don't know. My brain hit a dead end here. So yeah, I guess just that I haven't even been posting stuff on Instagram related to these stories. I just post like the dogs and my weekend and Tucson stuff, and I'm kind of okay with that right now. So I'm going to do my best to capture pictures and videos of some of the Halloween Tucson stuff that we do this month, and I will share it on the Instagram. And I meant to take pictures or do a little video of my very sad amount of Halloween decorations. When I got on with my therapist today, she was like, I have like a hanging paper lantern with a skull on it hanging in the office. And so she was like, oh, I see the Halloween decorations. I was like, yeah. And I like really wanted to continue on with the conversation and be like, yeah, but like, this is only like one of like 8 decorations that I have, and I don't really have that many, and it doesn't look that good. I would really love to do, there's different styles of Halloween decorations. Like there's like super, super scary where you have like blood dripping down your windows and, just gory, scary. And then I feel like there's a more refined, just like black witch hats and black cats. And I don't know, there's just different styles. I would love it. I would love to find and get decorations to like have my whole house be kind of a theme. All of it going together. All right, I'm getting way down a rabbit hole here. So let's focus in. Okay, let's see how long I blabbered on this for. 24 fucking minutes. Wow. Of course, I don't have a pen. 24 minutes. I can remember that. Okay. Well, let's jump back into the final part of these Austin yogurt shop murders, which again, I hope this doesn't feel rushed. There's a lot of information that happens between 1999. When we left off last time, I think what I said was that in 1992, the Mexican government announced the arrest of a man known as the Terminator. He was the leader of a motorcycle gang in Mexico that had been, I found out more information about that. They had apparently been linked to some sexual assaults that had occurred in Austin. And then he also matched the description of a man who was potentially seen outside the yogurt shop that night. Anyways, it ended up being nothing. And he was ruled out as a suspect. And then the case went cold until 1999. It actually picked up a little bit before 1999, like 1998-ish. And I came across some really interesting information in that book that I've kept talking about by Beverly Lowry. Want to make sure to definitely give her credit because a lot of information came from that book. So in December, it was 97, 98, around that time. The case had been cold for several years. Reese Price, the former manager of I Can't Believe It's Yogurt, contacted the investigator on the case, the investigator who is now on the case. And she asked the investigator if they knew that before the murders, both herself and Jennifer, one of the 4 victims, had been receiving harassing phone calls, not only at home, but also at work at I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. She also mentioned that her apartment had been burglarized around the same time, and that nothing valuable had been taken, though. Like a television was left behind, jewelry was left behind. But what whoever broke into her place did do was neatly arrange some of her underwear on the bed and then placed a kitchen knife on top of her underwear, which to me is fucking horrifying. If I came home and found my underwear neatly folded, lined up on my bed, first of all, I don't neatly fold my underwear ever. So that would be shocking to see it neatly folded, but kidding. And then a knife on top of it, and knowing that somebody had broken into my home and done that, I would have U-Haul here packing up my whole entire place so quickly. Like, no way. So anyways, when Reese learned that Jennifer and Eliza's shirts had cuts, the shirts that they were wearing the night that they were murdered, and that were found in the yogurt shop, had apparently had clean cuts in their collars. It kind of reminded her of the unsettling feeling that she had when she saw the knife on her neatly folded underwear in her burglarized apartment. She told the investigator, Jennifer and I looked similar at the time. We were both petite with long, light brown hair. And I don't know, is there a connection here? So the investigator said, I don't know, but why don't you come down to the station, tell me more. So she did. And during her visit, she shared that there was a crawl space above the ceiling that connected different shops, like the yogurt shop. I remember next door was some type of party shop. And so there was connected multiple shops in that strip mall. And multiple times, the girls who worked at the yogurt shop heard noises coming from up there. And at another time, Reese said that she found shoe prints on the toilet seat in the men's restroom, which she thought was weird. And she looked up and saw that a ceiling tile above the toilet had been moved. So she just used a broom, put the ceiling tile back in place, and never did anything about it, which is very strange to me. Unfortunately, this, while very disturbing and weird to me, this is very fucked up. Like, how could this have not come out back when this was being investigated right after it happened? This seems super pertinent to me because nobody up until now can figure out like who did this, but if, I don't know, maybe they could find a hair in the crawl space or something. It just seems like super pertinent information. It shocks me that this didn't come out sooner. Unfortunately, at this point, years later, it was troubling, but amounted to nothing. There was nothing that they could do with this. So that was that. And in August of 1999, August 6th, to be specific, a newly appointed, tripped over my own words. On August 6th in 1999, a newly appointed task force held its first formal meeting, and they were revisiting this case with renewed focus. They had 6 investigators and 1 sergeant dedicated to this case. And they also enlisted the help of other agencies to help re-examine this case with fresh eyes, because at this point it was considered a cold case. And the investigator, Johnson, the same one who was talking to Reese, what I just talked about, he sat everyone down and he had a 4-hour PowerPoint presentation that had 205 slides. That's a lot of slides. That's a very long PowerPoint presentation. And I love a PowerPoint presentation. I love a presentation. I love designing them. But this is not the time to talk about that, so I'm going to talk about that later. But yes, a 4-hour PowerPoint presentation featuring 205 slides. And the presentation was titled, "The Investigative Plan to Pursue Maurice Pierce." Now, I don't know if you guys remember who Maurice Pierce is. Hopefully you do, because it's been a couple weeks since we've been on this case, but the last episode, part 3, I talked strictly about Maurice Pierce and 3 of his friends, kind of giving you a breakdown of who they were, what they looked like, their personalities, things like that. So he had been initially questioned shortly after the murders because he was found carrying a .22 caliber handgun at a mall near the crime scene. But he was, ultimately released due to lack of evidence connecting him to the murders at that time. Obviously, years later, this investigator with his new investigative task force feels that Maurice shouldn't have been let go and that there is something there to pursue. Prior to this presentation, the task force had been, talking about, well, Maurice he was in a lot of the witness testimony. They spent a lot of time on him back then during the initial investigation. So at this point, now that they were revisiting the case, they wanted to either rule him out as a suspect or focus on him as a suspect. And this presentation clearly titled "Investigative Plan to Pursue Maurice Pierce" signaled the decision to focus on him rather than eliminate him. His presentation included color photos from the crime scene, billboard portraits of the victims, horrific images of the bodies, mugshots of the suspects, timelines, charts, and he even included sound effects like drum rolls and applause to highlight key moments, which I'm impressed by. It was honestly a dynamic and suspenseful presentation that kept the entire task force very engaged. What was lacking from this presentation was John Jones' name. It was rarely mentioned. And John Jones was the original. Remember, he was the guy who at the very beginning of this story, he had like CBS or ABC. He had some journalist in his car, and he was the first homicide detective to the scene. And I think that he was also part of the group of investigators, police back in 1991 who ruled Maurice out and let him go back then. So advancements in investigative techniques and this fresh review of the case and all of the case files, like all of the interviews, all of the witness testimony, everything, led detectives back to Pierce and to his acquaintances, the three other boys, Forrest Wellborn, Springsteen, and Michael Scott. Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. So, basically, there is online, there's not a ton of information. There's really very little specific information about what actually caused this new task force to focus so heavily on Maurice and Forrest and Robert and Michael. There's almost no details about it, aside from the investigators revisited earlier tips and statements. They found inconsistencies. They found connections that had previously been overlooked. They used new interrogation strategies, things like that. Beyond that, there's nothing. Now, in Beverly Lowry's book, there's a lot. There's 4 or 5 entire chapters dedicated to the kind of pursuit of Maurice Pierce and his friends. And I'm not including that in this because that, while it is fascinating, it would rule out any need for me to do this kind of as a more scripted podcast down the road, a deeper dive. And it would make this, at least 4 more episodes probably. So hopefully that's understandable. And we're going to go with just that they revisited earlier tips. They found inconsistencies and new connections and decided that they wanted to question Pierce, Wellborn, Springsteen, and Scott again. And they started with Pierce. But it wasn't Pierce who kind of shifted the entire interrogation. It was actually Michael Scott. Michael Scott was interrogated for 20 hours over the course of 4 days. And at some point during those 4 days, he confessed to taking part in the yogurt shop murders. Several days later, Robert Springsteen also confessed under many, many hours of questioning. And because it wasn't, it was Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, Forrest Wellborn, and Maurice Pierce. They were all friends. They were all together the day of, the night of, we talked about that in a much earlier episode, but it wasn't, some of them, Maurice Pierce was like, oh, I can't remember. I'm doing this from memory. If you can't tell, I'm like, I can't even get the words out. Maurice Pierce said he didn't really remember where he was. This is back in 1991 when he was questioned. He was like, oh, I think I was babysitting my sister, but I'm not exactly sure. And so all that the police knew back then and now, aside from these confessions, was that the 4 boys were together during the time of the yogurt shop. And because of that, and because Michael Scott's confession and Robert Springsteen's confession also implicated Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wellborn, all 4 men were arrested on capital murder charges. In December of 1999, so about 2 months later, a judge ruled that Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wellborn, who were 16 and 15 at the times of the killings, could be tried as adults. And that was December 9th. December 14th, a Travis County grand jury indicts Robert Springsteen on 4 counts of capital murder. And the DA announces that he is going to seek the death penalty for Springsteen. On December 18th, so 4 days later, a grand jury indicted Maurice Pierce and Michael Scott on 4 counts of capital murder. And prosecutors said that they would seek the death penalty against Scott, but could not seek the death penalty against Maurice Pierce because he was a juvenile at the time. Even though he was able to be tried as an adult, I guess he wasn't able to be given the death penalty because he was a juvenile. I don't know why I had to say that twice. And then later, not quite a year later, but June 2000, a judge dismissed the capital murder charges against Wellborn after a second grand jury declined to indict him. And I would love to know more information about that. Like, why? Why was he the only one that no jury wanted to indict? And for those who, like, I'm guessing most people have heard the word indict, as have I. And I know I've given the definition and talked about it in the past, but it's one of those words that I really struggle to remember the meaning of, specifically. So to be indicted means that a person has been formally charged with a crime by a grand jury. It's a legal process that is used mostly in serious criminal cases. So during an indictment, a grand jury will review evidence presented by prosecutors to determine whether there is enough probable cause to believe that the person committed the crime. If the grand jury finds that there is sufficient evidence, they issue an indictment which officially accuses the person of the crime and then leads to a trial. It does not determine whether they're guilty, whether they're innocent. It just simply means that this case is going to court. So that was really hard for me. I don't know why, but that is a very difficult thing for me to remember. I'm hoping now that I'm like saying it specifically on the air. I'm not on the air, but you know what I mean. I'll remember it, but we'll see. But I'd be interested as to why Forrest Wellborn was not indicted, and yet the other three boys were. I'm actually writing that down because I had a star next to it on my computer, but I'm a real pen to paper person. Wellborn, not indicted. Question mark. There we go. So in April 2001, jury selection began in the capital murder trial of Robert Springsteen, who was, now this is something that does confuse me. He was tried for the death of Amy Ayers. And I don't know why just her death. Was he then also tried for the other three? I don't think so. I'm not sure. And that could be misinformation that I got, because there was, as there is with every single case I do, there's always conflicting information. It's shocking that like an article from 1996 in Austin will say something very different from an article in 1997 in Tennessee. Like there's always conflicting misinformation. I mean, and these are, prestigious, I guess as prestigious as a newspaper can be, newspapers. So I would assume that the facts are right, but there's no way for both the facts to be right. So I don't know if they were tried. That's a big one. Ugh, hate to admit that. I don't know if they were tried separately for each girl's murder. I don't believe so. Ooh, I'm going to get a lot of feedback on this one. We're going to put a question mark there. I'm not gone. I'm just writing that down. So, prosecutors arrived in court. They had Robert Springsteen's confession, but they had zero physical evidence tying him to the crime scene. Now, the prosecutors also argued that Robert and the other boys knew information about the crimes that only the perpetrators would know, including the type of gun used and the position of Amy's body. That seems very viable to me. When they were being questioned, the boys said they must have heard that on the news. The investigators said that wasn't released on the news. Again, who knows? We're really getting into the weeds there. So that's what the prosecution argued. The defense attorneys argued that the confessions, they said the details from the crime scenes were actually incorrect that Robert Springsteen shared. and that he was coerced because it was a long, abusive interrogation by police officers who asked leading questions and steered him away from claims that didn't match the evidence. So, and I've talked about this a lot. I'm not gonna go down this road, but I've never been in that situation, so I don't know. It is really hard for me to understand admitting to a murder that I didn't do unless you are full on torturing me, ripping out my fingernails and teeth and like that. Maybe then, I don't know. But just like sitting in an interrogation room and having a cop, 20 hours is a very long time. Nonetheless, I don't care. I'm not going to say that I did something that I didn't do. However, I do understand that these are very stressful, nerve-wracking situations. I don't know. If anybody out there has any experience or insight on this, I'd love to know, because it is something that I still struggle to wrap my mind around. So that was essentially the argument during Robert Springsteen's case. Oh my God, I have to admit something. I've been recording this already, and I just got like a horrible feeling that his name wasn't Robert Springsteen, because I just have them by their last names to save time when I'm typing this all up. I was like, wait, is it not Robert? It is. Phew. It's a lot of names between the investigators, the four boys. It's a lot of names, so forgive me, but it is Robert. So that happened. His trial happened in April 2001. In June 2001 was the verdict and sentencing. And I thought this was really interesting. One of the jurors began weeping, crying, when the foreman, I guess the main juror who hands the verdict over to the judge. Robert Springsteen was married at this time. His wife was sitting there and closed her eyes, waiting to hear the verdict. But Robert Springsteen, who was 26, was standing there with no expression, hands clasped at his waist, just standing perfectly still. And District Judge Mike Lynch said, "I hereby assess your punishment at death." So the death sentence was delivered after jurors deliberated for 11 hours over 2 days. And that was the end of the first trial in, this horrific crime. Of course, Springsteen's lawyers were planning to appeal, and they said that the appeal, among multiple issues, was going to target the fact that the judge allowed jurors to hear excerpts of co-defendant Michael Scott's confession. The lawyer said that this violated Springsteen's constitutional rights because they were not able to cross-examine Michael Scott. He couldn't be forced to testify. They couldn't cross-examine him because he also was awaiting trial on capital murder charges. And one of the jurors, I'm assuming after the fact, said that the jury considered Robert Springsteen's confession, but what they really considered was that it matched co-defendant Michael Scott's confession, and that was really kind of like the nail in the coffin, so to speak. There will be more. Don't forget that. That's a very important piece of all of this. And then this really got me, and this is one of those moments I really wish I had a co-host here to discuss this with, because in deciding between a life sentence and the death penalty, the jury had to determine, I copied this right from an article, by the way, the jury had to determine if Springsteen, who had small scrapes with the law since 1991, but no previous felony convictions. They had to decide if he represented a future danger to the community. They also had to decide if there were any factors that warranted sparing his life.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
What factor, like the fact that he has kids, the fact that he has a wife, the fact that he, well, I mean, like what if, let's say he volunteered at soup kitchen. I'm making this up. I don't know what he did, but he saved puppies and kittens. What would warrant sparing his life or not sparing his life? I guess I'm asking that to you, to the audience. Like let's say you're a juror here and you're deciding life in prison or death penalty. I always kind of looked at it as, well, it depends on the crime and how horrific the crime is and how certain I am that they did the crime. And then my mind goes to kind of like an eye for an eye, which I know makes the whole world blind, but does the punishment fit the crime? But I never really thought about it in the sense of, are there any factors that warrant sparing his life? Or is he a future danger to the community? Because I guess if he's not given the death penalty, potentially he could get out. And I don't know what those would be. That would be very difficult. And also, I just have never thought of it in that context. So let me know what you think. If you have, like, what would make you want to spare someone's life in this situation? Let's just use this crime at hand. Let's say that, he's convicted of this crime, participating in this crime. Would you give him the death penalty? Would you give him life in prison? And why? So that is June 2001. In September 2002, Michael Scott was, never mind. Sorry, guys. My brain immediately went to the office. I don't know why it did it now and not earlier. A jury convicts Michael Scott of capital murder in the death of Amy Ayers, and he is sentenced to life in prison. Again, why does it just say Amy Ayers? I don't know. And why did Michael Scott get life in prison rather than the death penalty like Robert Springsteen? Assuming that, supposedly their confessions were identical. It reminds me of a case we did a while back. 4 boys beat another boy in Las Vegas, I believe. And they all got very, very different sentences. And here we go again. So Robert Springsteen's been given the death penalty. Michael Scott has been given life in prison. In January 2003, charges against Maurice Pierce are completely dismissed and he is released from jail. Very little information on that. He didn't confess, though. Confess? He didn't confess, though. So I'm assuming that had something to do with it. Now, 3 years go by. We're at May 2006, and there is a big issue that comes up in the case. And that has to do with what I talked about earlier, that under the Sixth Amendment, defendants have the right to confront their accusers. But in Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott's trials, their confessions were used against each other without allowing them to cross-examine one another in court. So they used Robert Springsteen's confession in Michael Scott's trial. They used Michael Scott's confession in Robert Springsteen's trial. And those helped to convict both of them. And because of this is now 5 years after each of them, about 5 years, were found guilty. In 2006 and 2007, their convictions were overturned. In 2000, so the case was then sent back to Travis County. It was not a county case at the time. So now in June 2007, prosecutors are planning to retry Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. But first, they ordered DNA tests on the vaginal swabs that had been collected from the victims at the time of the murders. Because, there are advancements now since 1991, we're now at 2007. There's a ton of advancements in investigative protocols and crime scene investigation and DNA testing, certainly. So investigators had started to believe that maybe one of the victims had been sexually assaulted, if not all of them. And the prosecutors wanted to use a pretty new method of DNA testing called YSTR, which specifically detects male DNA. It took a long time to get these results. In April of 2008, the results came back and they were unexpected. The test revealed that a partial male DNA profile was found in one of the victims. Even more surprisingly, the DNA did not match any of the 4 men who had been originally arrested. So the DNA that they found from a vaginal swab of one of the girls, there was male DNA there. But it was not Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, Maurice Pierce, or Forrest Wellborn. This also went on to reveal that any other DNA found at the scene was tested against these 4, didn't match. So as a result, the charges were immediately dropped against Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott. And after spending 10 years in prison, the charges were dropped, I believe, unless my dates are incorrect, in 2008. But they were not actually released until 2012. I don't know if that's correct. That seems weird. I know we have some lawyers who listen and other people who work in the legal field. If you're listening and have a good explanation, I know I can look this up, but I sometimes find that asking you guys who are listening for your insight or your expertise, it's much easier for me to understand than looking it up, and it sticks more. Like, it's more meaningful, so I remember it. And then, of course, I will share it on the podcast. Does that sound correct? Like 2008, the charges are dropped, but you don't get released until 2012. I find that very hard to believe. Perhaps the charges were not dropped until 2012. My timeline may be slightly off. Either way, no one at this point now is in prison in 2012 for this crime. None of the 4 boys and no one else. And I know that I wanted to finish that timeline, so I took it up to 2012. We're going to go back to about 2010 here, when one of the 4 boys, who was a former suspect, although some didn't care about the DNA. They did not feel that completely ruled these boys out. So we'll just say a suspect. Maurice Pierce was shot and killed in 2010 by police. It was late on a Thursday evening in Austin. 2 officers spotted a car running a stop sign in a residential neighborhood around 11 p.m. That person running a stop sign was Maurice Pierce, and he tried to evade officers. He was trying to, weave in and out of some of the side streets and lose the cops who were following him. Couldn't lose them, so he stopped his car, got out, fled on foot. The 2 officers pursued him and split up and went in different directions during this chase. One of the officers, Frank Wilson, caught up to Maurice in a backyard and attempted to use a taser on him. Didn't work. The struggle continued out onto the street, and that is where Maurice Pierce quickly grabbed a knife from Frank Wilson's belt and slashed him across his ear, trachea, and carotid artery. Despite these really horrible injuries, Wilson managed to get one shot off out of his gun before he collapsed. Several other officers arrived very shortly after and were able to give him, first aid that proved critical in saving his life and keeping him from bleeding to death. I mean, Maurice Pierce slashed his carotid artery. That is, I don't know how fast, but that's fast that you bleed out. As it turned out, that one shot that Frank Wilson managed to get off did hit Maurice Pierce, and he was declared dead at the scene. So, this was not the first time that Pierce had been in trouble with the law. And his lawyer at the time of this incident, when Maurice was killed, spoke to the press and spoke to the public and said that she didn't know why Pierce would have chosen to run, like just running a stop sign, why he would have chosen to run and then assault the officer in such a horrific way. But she said that, he likely fled because he's terrified of police. He spent time in jail. He spent 3 years in jail for a crime that he didn't do. And he's had other run-ins with the police as well. So after he was released from jail in 2003, Maurice had said to reporters he's moving to Dallas. He's going to be closer to his wife and daughter. Apparently he did. And in 2008, he was stopped for speeding. And according to the police officer who stopped him, he was very nervous. And when the officer asked, "Why are you so nervous?" he said, "Well, I've been falsely accused of several crimes in the past." The officer told him, "You have an outstanding warrant and you're going to be arrested." And Maurice put his car in reverse and sped off. And as he did that, unfortunately, one of the officers somehow was attached to his car and he dragged one of the officers in the process of speeding off away from the officers. Apparently the officer ended up being fine. He didn't have very serious injuries. And Pierce must have gotten him off of his car at some point because then he got away. And he wasn't found for 2 weeks. Police ended up finding Maurice Pierce in a home in Northwest Austin, not far from where he would eventually be shot and killed. They found him hiding in a closet in a residential home, and he violently resisted arrest, but he was eventually subdued after being tased. He was charged with assaulting a public servant, and he spent about a year in jail and was later released on bail. He attended all of his court dates, and he was set to go to trial. And his lawyer mentioned that, it was clear that he was treated differently than a typical defendant. She claimed that a prosecutor in this particular case about him, speeding and dragging an officer and all this, Maurice's lawyer said, a prosecutor contacted me and told me that that Maurice may have been involved in the yogurt shop murders, even though he'd been exonerated, and we are going to have to bring that into this case. I don't know if they ever did. Ultimately, it unfortunately doesn't matter because he was killed after trying to kill a police officer, which, I don't know. What do you think? I'm not sure I buy the whole, I was in jail for 3 years for a crime I didn't commit, and I'm so terrified of police now that I'm going to try and slash their throats if they pull me over for running a stop sign. Feels aggressive. Feels more to me like, you are so happy that you got away with the murders and only spent 3 years in jail that now you're terrified of being caught again. I don't know. I get, as I'm saying that, now that feels judgmental. So I'm not sure. I'm way too Switzerland on a lot of things. What do you think? Is that a fair reaction to police officers and stuff. I don't know. So, a little bit more information of things that happened post all of this. In 2016, Robert Springsteen, who his capital murder conviction was overturned in 2006, he decided in 2016 that he was going to seek a court order that would officially declare him innocent of the yogurt shop murders, which would also make him eligible for nearly $720,000 from the state's wrongful conviction fund. According to his lawyer, this was like the only way that Robert could clear his name after the murder charges, because even though almost 7 years had passed since they had been officially dropped, it still affected his career, his reputation. He struggled to get a job. I mean, no kidding, of course. I'm sure that he, I would just imagine he would have to like leave life in Austin if that's even where he was. How could you live there after this? I had never heard of this. But I would imagine anybody who lives in Austin, or certainly lived in Austin at the time, or even lives in Austin, after that, this is like, does anybody who's listening live in Austin? Because I'd be curious to know, is this something that like everyone knows about? So the Travis County prosecutors opposed the request. They argued that Robert is trying to bypass state law and legal procedures. They claimed this could also impact their ability to retry him if new evidence in the case emerged. And he tried this. It was denied. He tried again. It was denied. Now his lawyer is going to ask a 3-judge panel from the Third Court of Appeals to reinstate this lawsuit. He said, all we're asking for is a hearing to go back to the trial court with instructions to listen to witnesses, consider the evidence, and determine, is he actually innocent? That's weird to me. Like, what? I mean, look, who doesn't want $700,000? Also, well, maybe if he's innocent, he has no problem with it. I don't know, though. He was convicted before. So if he's innocent, I'm not sure why he would want to do this. Anyways, his previous attempts to receive compensation for his time in prison had been denied by the state comptroller and judges in both state and federal courts. Prosecutors at the time, at 2016, said that they still consider Springsteen a suspect in the case. And so there was just no way that this was going to happen. So he was not given any money, and this never worked out for him. Nobody officially declared a court order that he was innocent. So, sorry, my phone just, lit up with, what's it called? My Citizen app. And it's usually only just Tucson things, but I'm assuming, this says the FBI arrested an OKC resident who was planning to launch a large-scale violent attack on Election Day on behalf of ISIS. We'll have to look into that later, because we don't get political on this podcast. It's hard to do right now. It's really, I never want to talk politics with anyone, literally. It's just so dividing, but even I'm finding it difficult to not voice thoughts on here. But because it is so dividing, I will keep my thoughts to myself and move on. So, There are two people that a lot of people still think may be involved or may be responsible for these murders. So I want to talk about some loose threads and then some issues with this investigation that still existed and exist. So recently, within the past 4 years, attorney Amber Farrelly, who worked on both Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen's defense teams, she said she's adamant that police had it all wrong. She told 48 Hours that she thinks that the 2 unidentified customers from the yogurt shop are who police should be fixated on. Now, I think I'm certain I mentioned these people, these 2 unidentified men who were sitting at the yogurt shop that day of the murders. But that was it. It never really went anywhere from there. She's talking about those 2 people. So she said that investigators interviewed 52 individuals who were in and out of the yogurt shop between 4:30 p.m. and 11 p.m. the day of the murders back in 1991. And she said that, several witnesses reported seeing either 1 or 2 men and described them in a consistent way. All these different witnesses described these 2 men in a consistent way. And she's like, she said, quote, "And we don't know who these 2 guys are. They've never been called in. That raises, in my opinion, the suspicion that these are the gentlemen who did it." And the woman from 48 Hours said, "Were those 2 men who've never been identified the last people in the yogurt shop as far as you know?" Farrelly, the lawyer, said, "Absolutely." She went on to explain that these men were seen, this is a direct quote, kind of leaned over the table, talking to each other and kind of whispering, like they didn't want anybody to hear what they were saying. One of them was said to have light, short hair, like dirty blonde, about 5'6", and appearing to be in his late 20s or early 30s. The second man was reportedly bigger, and both were seen wearing heavy coats, one possibly in a green army-style jacket and the other in black. Witnesses also said that they may have been driving in a green car that night. So the former lead investigator, John Jones, he's retired now, and of course still very troubled by this, the fact that it's never been solved. And these 2 unknown customers continue to weigh on his mind as well. He said, quote, "Yeah, it's kind of a question to me that to this day they haven't been identified. Is that evidence that they did it? No, but it's evidence that we really need to talk to them." Unfortunately, there is probably very little hope that will ever happen. If they have not been, those aren't very strong descriptions. And if they haven't been found out by now or come forward by now, after, 30-ish years, probably not going to happen. And, I'm going to not say anything that I was going to say. I will say that although some hope for a break in the case that will come in the form of a confession by the killer, ideally, or someone who knew the killer, the case is so well known that such the confessions might not be credible, because, lots of people, tens of 20s, that's not how you say it, but numerous people made false confessions over the years. So at this point, it would be hard to take a confession as credible unless it was the actual person who knew every single detail. But so much time has passed that it would also be difficult for prosecutors to corroborate any admission to the crime. People who were alive back then are not alive now, or have moved or have disappeared into other parts of the world. It would be very difficult, basically, which is extremely unfortunate. A few other weird things that I found, and these didn't really fit in anywhere in this story, so but they did seem weird to me. A detective on the case apparently later admitted to withholding information that ruled out Maurice Pierce's gun as the murder weapon. It was ruled out. His gun was ruled out as the murder weapon, I believe multiple times. Like they ran tests on it, then ran them again and again. But it sounds like he withheld that for a while. I don't know. Another detective was captured on security footage holding a gun to Michael Scott's head during the multi-day interrogation that led to his confession that named the other men. That was reported by Texas Monthly. That seems very damning to me and like That's the only place I saw that information, though. I feel like if that was true, if it's on security footage, why has that not been shared? Why is that not out? I don't know. On December 2021 was the 30th anniversary of the unsolved murders. Austinites, I didn't know that's what people from Austin were called, but apparently they're called Austinites, placed flowers around the memorial plaque that sits across from the site of the former yogurt shop. And in 2024, an ABC affiliate sat down with Amy Ayer's brother and his wife. They live in Stephenville in North Texas. And Amy Ayer's family says that she really fought for her life. And this is the first time I saw this information. She was hit with a cash register and shot twice. Angie Ayers said, quote, "They had to subdue her with strangling her, hitting her, and shooting her twice. And that's why we continue our fight, because she fought so hard to live." And Amy Ayer's brother Sean said that even though Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen said that, they were coerced under duress of 20 hours of questioning, he said, quote, "The confessions matched. They were interviewed separately, but when they got to details, the details they both said matched perfectly." Angie said they were never deemed totally innocent, so we are waiting for a retrial. But despite decades passing by, they haven't been retried because of that DNA testing, which I agree with what Sean says when he says it's reasonable doubt. It's a question we don't have the answer to. I kind of agree with that. Yeah, they found DNA in one of the girls that wasn't these men, but that maybe the girls were having sex with somebody else. I don't know. I'm not sure if that would make sense either. They were all very young, but I don't think that it rules them out either. I agree. But for the case, it did. The DNA evidence ruled them out, at least of the sexual assault, I guess. But the Amy Ayer's family still believes that these men were involved in the crime. And, the key question is, A, who does that DNA belong to? And B, is there another way to link these four men to the crime? And the family is still hopeful that advancements in technology will eventually give them some answers to many unanswered questions that they have. So I know that it's funny, Jane Butkiss, I haven't heard from her in a while, so I don't know if she still listens, but I know she's told me very, very clearly that she does not care for the unsolved cases. So I know that after 4 episodes, some of you might be like, damn it. Did I say at the beginning that this is unsolved? Maybe I did. I hope I did, because that feels like a little bit of rudeness. That's not correct how you say that, but it feels, there's a saying I want to say right here, like hiding the curtain something, and my brain is not getting there. Anyways, I'm sorry if I didn't say that up front. I hope I did. I'm trying to do that now when I have an unsolved case, so that if you absolutely fucking hate them, you can just not listen to that episode. But this one is unsolved still to this day. Absolutely horrible. If you have any information about these murders, there is a tip line still. It is 512-472-8477. I will put that in the show notes. Really shocking that this is still unsolved. I mean, I guess not. Going through this, reading the book, spending weeks researching this really gave me some insight into how incredibly, incredibly difficult it must be to solve cold cases that have been cold for decades. I mean, yes, there are advances in DNA and technology and things like that, but so many challenges. So really heartbreaking that that there is no answer to this. Would be really interesting to find out more about those two men. And that's it. I'm just looking. I had a few other little pieces of information here, but I think that this I did want to share. In 2022, lawmakers in Washington, D.C. passed a bill that was written with this specific case in mind. The bill was signed into law, and it was called the Homicide Victims' Families Rights Act. Basically, 3 years after a case has gone cold, the law allows loved ones to have a victim's federal case file reviewed. A full reinvestigation will use the latest technology to hopefully dig up new leads, which is great. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened yet for this case, but you never know. So yeah, that is the end. Feels a little anticlimactic, does it not? Of the Austin yogurt shop murder case. And I mean, it's not the end because there is no answer. But is the end of the story on Death by Southwest, which I'm sure some of you are very grateful for. And I don't know. I'd love to know your thoughts about, I've asked for your thoughts on a lot of things in here. I can't remember everything now, but love to know your thoughts about possibly doing this case, but like really, like investing like several months into talking to me firsthand, talking to any family members, investigators, people who would be willing to talk to me, getting interviews, and then kind of doing this more scripted so that I'm not saying every few minutes and inserting my own fucking annoying points of view. I just did it again. God. So I don't know. It's not a natural storytelling. It's not naturally how I want to tell stories, but sometimes it's good to try something different. So that's all I got. I'm going to look up the questions that I still have remaining about this case, because even when I spend it must be annoying to some of you when I'm like, well, I don't even know the answer to this. No, Indiana, no. She heard something outside. But especially for something like this, when I'm spent most of these cases, even if it's not a 4-part case or 4 episodes, I'm spending days, and sometimes, a few days this week, a few days the following week, researching it. So then once I get it all together, I do run through it before I get on here. You may never know it, but I do. But not with like a fine-tooth comb. So definitely sometimes there are things that as I'm writing it, I'm like, I got to look that up. And then I don't. And there we are. I'm human. I'm sorry. But I will look up about the fact, why wasn't Forrest Wellborn indicted, and why did some of the information I found say that they were only tried for Amy Ayer's murder? That does not make sense to me. So I will come back with those answers, hopefully, if I can find them next week. And beyond that, I will bid you all adieu and say good night. Thank you for listening. I love you. I hope I did this story justice. I feel, it doesn't matter how I feel. I feel terrible for the families, and I wish that they would get some answers. And I appreciate each and every one of you very, 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 very much. And we'll talk to you very soon. Okay. Bye, guys.
Death by Southwest is hosted by Jenna Schneider and Margot Carmichael.
Executive produced by Margot Carmichael.
Produced by Jenna Schneider.
Audio editing and sound design.